Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. I'm very excited to welcome Kenny at It's Kenny again to the podcast today for the special bonus episode celebrating the 60th anniversary of West Side Story and the films of 1961. How are we doing, Kenny?
Good, good. I'm very, very excited. And again, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk about this.
Thank you so much for being here. This is your first time on the podcast. I'd love to hear about like what role film has played in your life and what are some favorites you have?
All right, so some of my favorites, I got into older movies because of horror movies. So like George
Me too.
Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Oh, seriously?
Yeah. Oh, I love
Nice.
horror films. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what really got me into it. And like The Birds is one of my top three favorites, and that led me to like watching like AMC and stuff back when I was like a high school kid who didn't really like do sports or anything. So I would just want,
Back when AMC played movies like
yeah.
commercial free. I remember
So
that.
we're going back a ways. So it was a while ago.
Yeah.
So it's always been something that's been exciting to me, and just learning about them. I'm a big documentary fan.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's probably like one of the things that if you were to like take my personality and break it up into part, it's probably the biggest part of my personality. Film is
Oh, that's so cool. So you said The Birds is one of your three favorite films of all time?
absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Hitchcock's my favorite. It's funny, I when I talk about Hitchcock, I feel like people like The Birds, but I haven't met too many people who that's like their favorite.
Yeah, and even watching it, I can totally see why people wouldn't think that.
Hmm.
But I think it's just I love Tippi Hedren so much.
Yeah, she
Um,
is fantastic.
and I love Psycho too, and I can admit objectively it's a better movie, but just The Birds is close to my heart.
Yeah, The Birds might have been the first one I saw because I remember I went to like a friend's like Halloween party. I was like 11 and they played The Birds and I remember most of my friends were bored, right? Because the first 45 minutes pretty slow.
That's
So
true.
I already by 11 I was super into movies and I was like, no, I think there's something's going to happen here. and it and
That
it, and it paid off. It was great.
That actually reminds me of it's probably maybe 2013. Yeah, because I think it was the anniversary when they put that back in the theaters for a bit. And
Mhm.
I took my sister, and there were a lot of like older people there who might have seen it when it came out,
Yeah.
and they were all laughing during the movie, and I'm taking it seriously. So it was weird to experience
Yeah.
that.
I taught a college class 3 or 4 years ago. I did a Hitchcock class and we looked at four of his films. We watched Rear Window, Vertigo, Psycho, and The Birds. And the students really, really responded and loved the other three. The Birds they struggled with because I think a lot of the visual effects and the datedness of that. I think they struggled with it. And we talked about it. And that was the only one. Most of the college students who were like 19, 20, they just didn't really respond to The Birds. And I'm standing up there like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah, and if you think about like how much like iconic music are in like in the other movies, and with The Birds,
Right.
there's no
No
score,
music.
so
Hmm.
I can see that not really grabbing the attention of
Yeah.
students.
But we know the truth, Kenny. It's a great
We
film.
too. It is.
That last shot is so like amazing.
So good.
There's so much great stuff in that. That for me is Hitchcock's last like great film. Like he did a couple more after that. I like Marnie with Tippi Hedren's really interesting.
Hmm.
Frenzy, which I get to talk about next year because that came out in 1972. I get to do a Hitchcock episode on the regular podcast next year, which will be really exciting. His
I have
one and only his
opinions.
one and only R-rated film.
I have opinions about Frenzy, and I did not like it.
Oh, you don't like Frenzy?
I
I have issues
was
with it.
mad.
But it's like part of it is Torn Curtain and Topaz are rough. I don't know about you. Like those two are for me very rough. And Frenzy is at least a little bit like a back to his usual ways of suspense scenes, of long tracking shots, of taking chances. And it's also I thought it was kind of cool to see him play in the R-rated realm. Like that's very rare that a director works for 50 years in movies and he works long enough to have started in silent cinema and at the very end makes an R-rated thriller. Like that was kind of cool. I don't know. There's stuff I like about it. It's not a great movie. We'll talk about
Uh,
it next year.
uh, I do owe it a rewatch because I very much believe that you should see a movie like more than once. It can change your opinion on it. So I have the
Mhm.
Blu-ray somewhere. I'll pop it in sometime.
It's something that's so fascinating about movies because they don't really change unless Ridley Scott or someone goes in there and messes with
Yeah.
it. George Lucas. But as we get older, like when you watch a movie when you're in your 20s, then you watch it again 10 years later, or even 7, 8 years later, it does kind of change. It depends on the kind of movie it is. But I always find that interesting when you watch a movie a certain way when you're younger, and then as you get older, you look at it and go, oh no, actually it's about more of this. And like that's really exciting that a movie can stay the same, but as we change, like we read films differently. It's really cool.
And I've seen Tea and Sympathy so many times, and I found like new spots that like will make me cry because I'm that kind of guy. So yeah, the more like I watch something, it definitely the movie will stay the same, but I change, and it just changes how I watch it.
So outside of the birds, what are a couple other favorites you have? Is Tea and Sympathy one of them?
Tea and Sympathy has like an emotional hold on me that I is like enriching my life and ruining my life. I obsessed with it. I love it. It's so good.
Do
Have
I
you
need
seen
to
it?
do I need to leave the room? I've never seen that.
Oh, okay. I won't spoil
It's
anything.
from 56, I want to say. Is it like
Mhm.
mid 50s?
That's right. Yeah, I believe it is
And
56.
who's in it?
John Carr, Deborah Carr. One of my favorite things, and this
Is
isn't
that how you
spoiling
say her
anything.
last name? Is it
It
Carr?
it
I
is
always say
Carr.
Kerr. Okay, it's Carr.
I thought it was Carr for the longest time.
It's
Um,
pronounced Carr. That's good to know.
yeah, and you can see they're like embracing in the poster and everything. But there's this piece of trivia that I always find hilarious on IMDb where it says, "But despite them having the same last names, they're not related." And I'm like, I hope not.
Yeah. Would be an awkward film. So what do you like about that? Is that like a melodrama? Like what kind of a genre is that film?
Yeah, it's kind of like and I hate the phrase coming of age
Coming of
story,
age.
but it's one of those, and John Carr is very good at playing like sensitive, young, tortured guy, because he's like 17. I believe he turns 18 like during the plot in the movie, and I'm a sucker for just a sad boy movie when they're not like annoying and you actually care about them, and he's just
Yeah.
getting teased for like not being like as masculine as everyone else, and Deborah Carr just trying to like guide him and take care of him, but she can only go so far. That's all I'll say, but it's really good.
Deborah Carr is great. I want to say, isn't she famous for not ever winning an Oscar, but she was nominated a bunch of times? Isn't that right? And then she got an honorary when she was older
I do think that's correct.
by Glenn
Yeah.
Close. I think Glenn Close gave it to her.
Oh,
That's
if that's
my memory. I have like a vague memory. Like
I know
I
what I'm
think Deborah
YouTubing.
Carr was nominated at least 5 times, maybe more, but she never won. But she got an honorary when she was older. She's great. She's fantastic in another film from 1961, The Innocents,
Mm.
which I just looked at again, some of it last night. It's just like the most gorgeous movie. Like I don't know what it is about black and white cinematography from movies of the 1960s, but
Mhm.
it's just so beautiful, and it's such a creepy, unsettling film. Like it's just my favorite adaptation of the original novella, The Turn of the Screw. I just love that movie.
Mhm. And the children are so good. That's always my example of like good child acting. Like them
Mm.
and Dean Stockwell are like on a pedestal for me. Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, so any favorite films from the 1960s, from 60 to 69? This is such an interesting decade. Like my podcast is focusing on films of the 70s right now, which is one of my favorite decades of film, if not my favorite. But what I love about the 60s is that it looks so different in the early part of the decade. Film does from the latter part of the decade. Look at films made in 60, 61 versus 68, 69, and the landscape of cinema is so different. It's really an interesting evolution of movies in these 10 years.
And I think that my favorites from the 60s kind of showcase that because obviously I love like the big musicals that came out during
Mm.
the
A lot of
60s.
musicals.
Yeah, and then when it like 65 hits, Russ Meyer's Pussycat Kill Kill is one of my favorite
Okay.
movies. And then toward the end, 68, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead is one of my favorite. So
Mhm.
it really is a mixed bag of a decade for film. It
Yeah,
changes so much.
it's hard to get through the month of October for me to not watch Night of the Living Dead again. That's just a great. I love Dawn of the Dead. It's a whole different kind of thing.
Hmm.
There's something so just like primitive, like simple about Night of the Living Dead and that black and white and that gritty factor. I just have always loved Night of the Living Dead. So cool.
It's one of the, I've probably seen it, like, I'm not even exaggerating, probably around 300 times. It's my, like, if I want just like a comforting, like, kind of movie, I'll put it on, which is weird that it's comforting, but it
A
can still,
comforting film. No, I get that with Night of the Living Dead. Yeah.
yeah. And with it, accidentally going into public domain, I grew up with like so many terrible, like,
Yeah.
quality copies. So when, Criterion had their restored Blu-ray that came out, it was like
Oh,
watching it again for the first time. And there had
I
been
need to
some,
get
like,
that.
it's really good. There's the bonus features are incredible. And
My
there had been,
oldest, I believe my oldest DVD on this shelf behind me, for those of you watching, the oldest DVD I have, I believe, is Night of the Living Dead. It's like a special edition from like early 98, maybe. And it has 2 audio commentaries and it's got Night of the Living Bread.
I
The
remember
short.
that. Yeah.
And I have not ever sold it or gotten rid of it. I just keep it there. I'm like, I like this one, even though it's from 1998, my disc. Hopefully it stands up for another 10 years.
There's a book that's coming out. I literally just learned about this
Oh,
like in bed 2 nights ago called, I believe, Night of the Living Tapes, and it's about like the video home release history of Night of the Living Dead since it was released by so
oh,
many people. And I believe they've got like pictures of all the box art and stuff. Between that and Elvira's book, I'm doing good with reading this Halloween season.
yeah. I love books about film. It's my favorite thing. I'm an author too. I write novels, and I probably should be reading more novels. But when I want to sit for an hour and relax and read something, I read about movies. That's how I roll. I don't know about you.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
that sounds fun. Are you going to release a version of Night of the Living Dead yourself?
Oh gosh, that would be hilarious. I would love to do a commentary track just because, and then yeah, it'll just be like mixed bag of me getting saying information that I've learned from other commentary tracks, and then just talking about how what I was doing the first time I watched this scene and how it terrified me this way. It was, I believe, the thing that really got me into it was Bill Hinsman, who played the cemetery zombie,
Hmm.
when he was banging on the car. That terrified me. And I remember this was back when, like, I was a little like punk high school kid, and I was like,
Mm.
old movies, I don't want to watch those. And my friend at the time made me decide between Pillow Talk or Night of the Living Dead, and I was like, at least this one's a horror, and then it scared me and changed my life.
Yeah. That's funny you mentioned commentary. Something I've thought about trying to do either as like bonus episodes or for like a Patreon or something. I absolutely adore audio commentaries, and I've always liked the idea of starting to record a few of my own for films I love or films I don't love. Like, so yeah, if you're ever looking for someone to do a commentary for Night of the Living Dead, like just let me know.
I
That'd be
would
a lot
love
of
that.
fun.
That would be so much fun. Yeah, 100%.
Like I guess like I'd have to figure out like to record it. I feel like you'd have to have the movie on mute, or is there a way you could watch it with sound but also record and not have the mic pick up the sound of the movie? I don't
Yeah,
know
I
how that
think,
works.
yeah, if you've got like maybe like headphones that, it's all just going in there and they're not like, yeah, not leaking out. I have so many pairs of headphones
Oh,
because
okay.
this whole trying to like Zoom with folks and stuff. I went through a lot of like trial and error, so I'm sure there's one that I
Yeah.
could make work.
Yeah, but we'll talk. That'd be a lot of fun. So
Mhm.
let's see. Some of my favorite films of the 60s, obviously Psycho by Hitchcock, one of my favorite films of all time. And then The Apartment, which won Best Picture in 1960, Breakfast at Tiffany's, To Kill a Mockingbird, Lawrence of Arabia, The Birds, The Great Escape, Mary Poppins, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Speaking of great musicals, really fantastic musical from the 60s. My favorite James Bond movie, Goldfinger, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, the first film by Mike Nichols, The Graduate, the second film by Mike Nichols, Bonnie and Clyde, a movie that really just changed the face of cinema forever, was Bonnie and Clyde in 67. Planet of the Apes, Night of the Living Dead, Once Upon a Time in the West, 2001 A Space Odyssey, Rosemary's Baby, to name a few. I couldn't think of a good one from 69. I'm like,
That's
Midnight Cowboy was fine.
yeah, that's
On
where
Her
it
Majesty's
gets
Secret Service. I don't know.
a little dicey for me around then. And nothing against the 70s, and I'm sure with your podcast focusing on 70s now, I could learn a lot about good stuff. But historically, I don't find too many 70s films that I love, but
Oh, really? Okay.
I would love to find more.
Yeah, something that's a little hard for me on the podcast right now is I'm such a huge horror fan, but like 70, 71, 72 is not a great period of horror films. Like you have the occasional, like we watched Let's Scare Jessica to Death from August. That was really interesting. Next year, we get to talk about Last House on the Left, the debut by Wes Craven, which isn't necessarily a great film, but it's like an interesting piece of horror history, the way that that was all put together. But yeah, this is not like we've looked at some great films this year for 71, but not really in the horror realm. Like it's been kind of shoddy there. But we will get to some better ones later in the decade. So before we get to West Side Story, our main focus today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about 60 years ago in cinema. The top 5 films of the year. I'm really interested in Oscar history. I'm also interested in box office history. Like, what was popular? What did people see? And this was interesting to me. So 1961, the Disney movie 101 Dalmatians came out. So I would have assumed that that was in the top 5. It was not. 101 Dalmatians was number 8 of the year. Isn't that weird?
That's surprising.
But number 5 and number 4 are both Disney movies. Number 5 was The Absent-Minded Professor, and number 4 was The Parent Trap. So those 2 films made more money, did better box office than 101 Dalmatians. That kind of surprises me.
Yeah, that is interesting.
101 Dalmatians is short. Like they could play it more. Like wouldn't it make more money?
That's a good way. Yeah.
The Parent Trap isn't Parent Trap like 2+ hours? The original with Haley Mills from 61. I mean, that's a long movie. Interesting.
Oh gosh, it is. Yeah,
but it's a lot of fun though. Have you seen the original Parent Trap?
Yep, and Maureen O'Hara's the mom in that one, correct?
Maureen O'Hara.
Yep, and I love her, and I love even Haley Mills. Have you seen the movie The Moon Spinners? It was a Disney movie.
Yes, I watched. So I did a really nerdy thing the day that Disney Plus launched. I didn't know where to start, so I just went to the beginning. They had a thing called Disney Through the Decades, and I just started with Steamboat Willie and just watched it year to year. And so I watched The Moon Spinners. I was like 64, somewhere around there. And then in like earlier this year, they did away with Disney Through the Decades. Like that channel, it wasn't there anymore. So I had to go on like Reddit and find like the list. So I'm currently in 1988 watching Oliver and Company next.
Yes, enjoy.
Which I haven't seen since I was like 3. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Parent Trap was 61. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously Disney had a really good year. I mean, 3 of their films were in the top 10. So that was cool. And then the top 3, number 3 was El Cid, an epic historical drama starring Charlton Heston. I've never seen that. The Guns of Navarone, epic adventure war film starring Gregory Peck. And then what do you think the number 1 film of the year was, Kenny?
I have no idea. All of these are like shocking me. So there's no way I'm not going to get it. What was it?
Make a guess. Just an educated guess. What do you think it was?
All right. And you said this was for 61, correct?
For 61.
Oh, what came out?
What's another film from 61 that we're going to talk about in a moment?
Oh, I thought, okay. Yeah. All right. So West Side Story.
West Side Story.
I was thinking like, besides that.
Yeah, right. You're like, what else came out? It's really not, 61 is not a great year for cinema. Like I looked up like 2 different articles, like best films of 61, and I'm going down the list. I'm like, yeah, okay. There's not like a lot of gems. But yeah, so West Side Story, it earned about $20 million in 1961 dollars, which is pretty damn good. So it was a big hit of the year. Came out in October of 61. This was the year of the 34th Academy Awards ceremony. Do you know your Oscar history? How well West Side Story did this year?
Okay, so West Side Story, I believe, was it 10 Oscars they won?
It was nominated for 11 Academy Awards, and it won 10.
Ah, nice.
Poor Ernest Lehman, the screenwriter, the only award it did not win was Best Screenplay.
Oh, he's like the Courtney Cox of the bunch. Her not getting the Emmy for Friends, that's him.
Courtney Cox, Friends. Yeah. Oh my God. That bugs me when I think about that. Courtney Cox was so great on Friends. How did she never get nominated over 10 years? It's so ridiculous. But yeah, so he was the only one that didn't win. So he was like just sitting in his chair like, really, guys? Really? I guess musicals, right? It's kind of hard sometimes, musicals, for the Academy to think of it as best screenplay, I guess. But yeah, so Best Picture went to West Side Story. Best Director went to Robert Wise for West Side Story. Best Actress went to Sophia Loren for Two Women. Have you seen that or heard of that?
I feel like a long time ago.
Sophia Loren. I tried to watch it once. It was kind of slow. I couldn't really get through it. Much better film. Best Actor went to Maximilian Schell for Judgment at Nuremberg. Really good courtroom drama. Mm-hmm. Great performance by Judy Garland in that movie. Mm-hmm. Kind of a dramatic role for her in that.
And Monty Clift too, who I'll reference later. I got a story. Yeah.
Okay. Best Supporting Actor went to George Chakiris. Is that how you say his name?
I was going to ask you.
George Chakiris, I think, for West Side Story. Best Supporting Actress went to Rita Moreno for West Side Story. And the film won 10 Academy Awards total. That was almost a record. So, you know the record amount of wins for any movie?
My brain's thinking Titanic. Is that it?
Yeah. Well, so the most a movie has ever won is 11. And there are 3 films that share that. Ben-Hur from 59. Ben-Hur, I believe, was nominated for 12 and it won 11. I'm trying to remember which one that lost. Might have been like editing, or I can't remember. That poor guy. It's like really, you give to everything else. And then Titanic won 11. That was nominated for 14. And then Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King was nominated for 11 and it won all 11. So that was a clean sweep. And as Steven Spielberg said as he opened the envelope for Best Picture, it's a sweep. Or what is it? He said something like that.
I love that iconic award announcing moment. That, and I think of Ingrid Bergman when Barbra Streisand and Katharine Hepburn tied, and she goes, "It's a tie." So I love that. That's stuck in your brain.
Can you do the Ingrid Bergman? It's a tie.
It's a tie.
He says this, and everyone's like,
she calls it The Lion in the Winter, and I'm like, that's not the name, but I love it.
And have you heard the story that Barbra Streisand voted for herself? So if she had not voted for herself, then she wouldn't have won.
Well, that was a good call.
It's like in the movie Election, right? When Paul decides, I'm not going to vote for myself. I'm going to vote for Tracy. And then Tracy wins by like 1 vote.
Amazing.
Nice going, Paul. So that was the Oscar ceremony. Was a big celebration of West Side Story. And that happens some years. Some years they kind of distribute the awards all around. Those are usually the ones I like better. Like when you have a mix of different things, when it's just like the same movie over and over. Makes it easy to do your Oscar ballot, like the Year of Gravity. I just like picked Gravity for everything, and then it just kept winning everything. I was like, oh, that was my best year. I got 21 out of 24.
Nice.
I've never gotten more than that. But let's see. So a few more things about the year 1961. So people who were born that year who went on to be very important in the world of cinema included Todd Haynes, Eddie Murphy, George Clooney, Michael J. Fox, Woody Harrelson, Lawrence Fishburne, James Gandolfini, R.I.P. James Gandolfini, Peter Jackson, Meg Ryan, and Alfonso Cuarón, speaking of Gravity, all born in 1961. So I don't want to, put an age on any of these people, but they're 60 this year.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I had no idea. That's fun. I like that you do that. The birth year thing. That's cool.
And then you think, okay, so yeah, who's turning 60 this year? Sorry, Meg Ryan. We love you.
Oh, we do. I miss her.
I miss her so much. My favorite romantic comedy of all time is When Harry Met Sally. Do you like When Harry Met Sally?
I do. I think I like You've Got Mail a little bit better, but
You've Got Mail is
they're
great
both
too.
Great.
Yeah. I like how tight When Harry Met Sally is. It's 90 minutes long. It's just like the perfect length. You've Got Mail, I love. I think it goes a little long in the last half hour. But other than that, but it's it's great. I love You've Got Mail. So people who died in 61, like the 3 that you our listeners might have heard of. Gary Cooper passed away this year, Oscar-winning actor from Sergeant York. Marion Davies passed away in 61, and Chico Marx of the Marx Brothers all passed away in 61. Major film debuts, people who had their film debut in 61, Anne Margaret in Pocketful of Miracles, the final film of the director of, oh my God, I just blanked on his name. I'll get back to it. Pocketful of Miracles. Have you ever heard of this movie? It was kind of a return for Bette Davis a little bit.
I haven't seen it, but when I'm just reading through like Bette Davis stuff, I know I've seen the name.
Frank Capra, that's the director's
name. Ah, there you go.
It's a Wonderful Life. Frank Capra was his last movie. So I've been in 2021. I've been doing a year of Bette Davis. I've been watching all of her films, and I just watched Pocketful of Miracles about 3 nights ago, and it was pretty rough.
Oh, darn.
From 61. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, that lined up, watching a 61 movie that I'm talking about the year. Not great. It was interesting to see her in such like a big production again, because she had been in a lot of like smaller films after All About Eve in the 50s. But Pocketful of Miracles, first film with Anne Margaret, who would go on to be Oscar nominated, great actress. Warren Beatty made his film debut in Splendor in the Grass. Have you seen that film? The other 61 film starring Natalie Wood.
I love that movie so much. It's so good.
Yeah, Elia Kazan,
Yeah.
beautifully shot, like in really great pairing, and Warren Beatty and
Their
Natalie Wood.
chemistry is so good. Even just like on like red carpets when they had like their little thing, they looked so good together. I love them together.
Yeah. So that was his film debut, and Warren Beatty, of course, had a really spectacular career in film. Even with Ishtar, he had a good career. Louis Gossett Jr. in Raisin in the Sun. Gene Hackman in Mad Dog Call. Ron Howard made his first movie, 5 Minutes to Live. Mary Tyler Moore, her first film was called X-15. I kind of want to see that. That's interesting.
Like a robot movie? What is that?
I don't know. I'm like, did Mary Tyler Moore play like a scientist in a science fiction film?
And Ordinary People is like one of my other top 3 favorite movies.
Oh, okay.
She's
Great
so
film.
good. And so I've always wanted to see more of her films. I've seen a lot of her TV, but
we think of her as a TV actress, but Ordinary People showed that she could be really spectacular when she had the right role and material. Joe Pesci made his film debut in 1961 in a film called Hey, Let's Twist. I didn't even think Joe Pesci was in any movies before Raging Bull in 1980. So he must have like had a little like extra work or something on that. I don't think he played like a significant role in Hey, Let's Twist, but I like the title. Bert Reynolds, his first film from 61 called Angel Baby. I don't know if he played Angel Baby. And then George Siegel, R.I.P. George Siegel, his first film, The Young Doctors from 61. So have you seen any of those movies I just mentioned besides Splendor in the Grass?
Young Doctors rings a bell.
I know, it sounds I feel like there was an 80s comedy called Young Doctors in Love. I feel like I know that one a little better.
That title alone sounds promising. Yeah.
I don't think I've even seen it. I think I saw like the VHS cassette back in the day and it just stuck with me. And then my final segment before we get into West Side Story is Eye on Hitchcock. I like to just say a few words about what Hitchcock was doing in this year. So probably the biggest thing, the two big things from 61, he would have started working on The Birds in 61. I don't think they were shooting it until 62. I'm not 100% on that. I mean, the film came out in the summer of 63.
Yeah, I think that's correct because I remember after Psycho, there was like a whole him trying to get like find like the actress to play Melanie Daniels, and that was like a significant kind of search. So yeah, I don't think it picked up right after Psycho. So 62 sounds more accurate.
Well, yeah, but I want to say in 61 he was at least getting started, like working on the script with its writer. And I mean, the meeting with Tippi Hedren, like when he saw her commercial, and he said like, didn't he say to his assistant, "Find me that girl"?
Find the girl. Yeah.
Find the girl. That might have been late 61. I don't know if that was. It would have been around then, maybe very early 62. So yeah, something around there. Because most of his career until The Birds, it's like a film a year. Almost every year from like 1925 to 1960, almost every year he has a film. And then starting with The Birds, like it's a little bit more sporadic. But the other big thing from 61 was he was nominated. His final nomination for Best Director came in early 61 for Psycho. So that would have been like, I don't know, like back then the award ceremony was like in March, April, is later than we have it now, at least until last year. But so yeah, that was his last. Can you believe Hitchcock never won Best Director? Is that a weird like piece of Oscar history?
I think he should have won, absolutely, but it doesn't shock me because I know that I know how people act, especially towards like suspenseful horror things. So
right.
I'm not shocked.
I think, yeah, he was thought of as kind of like a thriller guy, and it's harder to get nominated, let alone win. I think if there was any film he could have won for, it was Rebecca from 1940, because that film won Best Picture, and Best Director went to John Ford for The Grapes of Wrath. John Ford would win the following year for Best Director for How Green Was My Valley. So I feel like they could have just given it to him the next year.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works. But yeah, so that was the closest he came. He did win an honorary Oscar in I want to say it was the early 70s. Was it the late 60s or the early 70s? Somewhere around
I
there.
think probably early 70s. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I can in my head picture what he looked like getting it, and just in my brain, I think that was more toward like 70s how he looked.
Okay, yeah. Have you seen the clip of him? What he said when he won that honorary Oscar? What he said?
Oh, it was short, wasn't it? What did he say?
He said, "Thank you," and then he left.
All right, there we go. Yeah.
He was the man of few words sometimes. Not
Mm.
so much on his show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. There he would talk often for a while.
Oh yeah.
But when he won his honorary Oscar, not so much. So yeah, 61, he's basking in the glory of Psycho, like maybe his biggest hit. I mean, that movie was just huge. I mean, it was just insane. Coming off of North by Northwest, which was a different kind of blockbuster moneymaker. And everybody was like, do not make this low budget black and white horror film. And it
Hmm.
turned into this sensation. So that's always really cool part of his history. I always really like that. Psycho could have, even if people had liked it, it could have been like Vertigo. It could have just been like a box office flop at the time, but Vertigo was a flop at the time, even though it's very respected now. But Psycho
Hmm.
wasn't. Psycho people went and saw Psycho, man. They wanted to check it out, see what it was all about. All right, so that takes us to our focus today. West Side Story premiered in October of 1961. What's like your history with this movie? What's the first time you saw it? Like, what do you remember? Like, when do you remember seeing it for the first time?
I think it was just like one day after work, like the person I was with at the time, we were eating dinner and just like, hey, do you finally want to see this movie that you should have seen many, many, many years ago? And I did, and I became obsessed with it, listened to the soundtrack for like the next coming like week, got my Blu-ray copy of it.
Hmm.
And yeah, so and I love Natalie Wood. It's not my favorite Natalie Wood movie, but it
Okay.
is a movie that even just rewatching it in preparation for this, I want to watch documentaries about it. I want to just
Right.
it was once it gets in your brain, like you forget, like, or maybe you don't forget, but sometimes I forget just how good it is.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
so it's one of those kind of
It's
things
it's
for
one
me.
of those it's one of those movies that's like a treat whenever I have an excuse to watch it. Like it came to Reno, I want to say 2013, 2014, like for a week-long engagement in a theater we have here. And I was like, oh, I have to see that on a big screen. And it was just there's something about those like epic musicals from the 50s and 60s, watching that on a giant screen. It's just like so exciting. There's no other way to watch these movies, really. Like watching West Side Story again on this TV behind me, like I'm like, it's fun, but there is something about the theatrical experience for these older musicals. There's nothing like it, right?
Yeah, I remember when My Fair Lady got their restoration. I traveled like an hour just to go see it on a big screen,
Oh
and
wow.
I'm so grateful I did. I 100% agree with you. That's the way to see it.
Yeah, but sometimes the TV at home is all we have, and we make the best of it. Yeah, I want to say I don't think I saw this movie until maybe college. I don't think like my parents never showed it to me. My parents weren't big musical people, so I didn't see a lot of musicals when I was young, outside of like the kid ones like Mary Poppins and Willy Wonka. Like I saw those when I was young. Films like West Side Story, which are a little bit more adult, like those I feel like I watched on my own later. But I was big into Oscar history when I was young, and so at some point I think I was trying to watch as many Best Picture winners as I could. And when I saw that this one had 110, like I was like, okay, I got to see this. And I've loved it ever since the the first time I watched it. And I would say every 5 to 6 years I find myself watching it again for whatever excuse that I can come up with. So,
That's a good way of going about it, because I know, like I say, like I watch Night of the Living Dead all the time, but
yeah,
I feel like if I did that with West Side Story, it would kind of like diminish it a little bit for me.
yeah.
So keeping it as like a treat every couple of years is a good way to go.
Yeah. There are some movies that I can watch once a year. My favorite film of all time, Sunset Boulevard. I could watch it once a month for the rest of my life, and I don't think I'd ever get sick of it. Like I just love every second of that
So
movie.
good.
I love just like basking in the glory of every moment of that movie. West Side Story, I don't have as much love as like a movie like Sunset Boulevard as some of these other classic films, like Hitchcock's, some of his work. But it's just a spectacular movie. It brings, I think, it brings joy to everybody who watches it, and the cast is amazing. And yeah, so what are some things that we love about this movie? Why is it held up so well 60 years later?
The music is so
The
good.
music.
The music is so
Oh,
good.
it's the
And
music, man. It's so good.
even just like the intro when it goes from like the title card switches to like the actual like the city, that it's
Oh yeah.
just so good. And a lot of great acting in it. Yeah, Rita Moreno was fantastic. Just watching this again, yeah, recently, I was just like, You're
Yeah,
so good.
the way the movie opens is so cool, like that, going from this part of New York, and then we just keep going, and then we slowly move down to kind of our setting of the movie, and the way that that's handled in a film where, I mean, a lot of this is sets, right? I mean, we're not like watching like natural locations in a lot of this, but it feels like we are because of the way the movie opens, and it's just, and going into that very first song, and I just think one of the most iconic images in all of film is the snapping of the fingers. Like, I'm just
Yep.
like, that's so just like iconic. Like every time I put this on, I'm like, oh, it just brings
That
such a smile to my face.
that profile shot of Russ Tamblyn just snapping his fingers.
Russ Tamblyn.
He's so good. He's one of like probably my favorite things in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Russ Tamblyn's great in it. Yeah, I mean, he's, maybe not the most like heralded, like most acclaimed performance of the movie, but yeah, he's a great part of this. Not every, like, the lead actors didn't win Oscars, but they're of course fantastic in this. I love the energy in the movie, the energy of the musical numbers, like the all the wide shots Robert Wise gives us are just so great. I mean, he is a filmmaker that I've always really admired, especially this period where he directs, over the course of 4 years, he directs a West Side Story in 61, Sound of Music in 65. And then between these two colorful epic musicals, he makes The Haunting, one of my favorite horror films of all,
Oh, very
in
good.
63. Like, I mean, how different can you get from the very quiet, restrained black and white The Haunting, and then surrounding that movie are these two colorful musicals? Like, it's so interesting to me. I think that shows his talent, in many ways.
Yeah, that's got to be good to like break up the monotony of work because working on a musical can't be the most easy thing in the world.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
I like just watching this movie again, really trying, like, analyzing the production, and I'm just like, God, this must have been really tough. Like, I mean, these movies are hard to make. Yeah.
Hmm. And
So
what?
when they're good, like, it's always kind of a mini miracle.
Mhm. And speaking about the music earlier, Marnie Nixon, I love
Mm.
her so much.
Hmm.
All like the different movies she did the dubbing for. So that's another thing that I forget about it because you think West Side Story, you think Natalie Wood, but then as soon as like I hear her voice, I was like, Marnie, I love you.
Yeah. Something not everyone might know is that we're not hearing Natalie Wood singing in this movie. Kind of an interesting choice. I didn't look up, like, was she trying to sing in her own voice in the movie and then they said no, or was she like, please someone find someone else to sing?
I believe that it was that she thought that it was going to be her
Oh,
vocals.
okay.
And I believe something similar happened like with My Fair Lady, where Audrey Hepburn thought that she was going to be using her vocals. So it was one
Oh,
of those
gotcha.
kind of scenarios.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unlike Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Once More with Feeling, where Sarah Michelle Gellar was like, don't make me sing. And then finally she was like, okay, I'll do it.
Amazing.
And it's like, I can't imagine that episode if it wasn't actually her.
Hmm.
Some reason in West Side Story, not to compare Once More with Feeling with West Side Story, they're two very different things. But like Natalie Wood, it works in this film. Like, it doesn't pull me out of the movie that's not Natalie Wood. Like, it doesn't bother me. I don't know. It works fine.
There are, yeah, certain scenes where her acting is just so good. And I think that if she
Mhm.
wasn't a great actress, then, and I know some people might not like her, I think she's a great actress.
Natalie Wood. Oh, I love Natalie
Yeah.
Wood.
Go,
Mhm.
oh, see, we're going to be great friends.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think not having her vocals, it didn't hurt at all. And just visually, she's very striking to look at. So she had a lot of other great things going on. We didn't need the vocals. It's fine.
Right, exactly. Yeah, she's so great. I love her in Rebel Without a Cause. I mean, her career, it was obviously cut short with
Yeah.
something we don't have to go into,
Oh boy.
but that's the whole thing. Did you watch the documentary about her life?
I've watched so
From
many documentaries.
last year, I think there was a film made about her life that was so interesting.
Was that
Uh,
the one where the family actually or they made it?
like they had yeah, the family was in it, and it was like on HBO. It was like 90 minutes, 100 minutes, something like that, and it was just
Yeah.
it went into everything. It was just really interesting, and it showed clips from a lot of her films, some of which I still have not seen. Some of her films from the 60s I still haven't seen, but everything I've seen her in, she's so striking. She was my dad's, like, his favorite, like, most beautiful woman in the world. He always say, like, well, what actress did you really love as when you were like my age, when I was in high school? And he was like, Natalie Wood.
It's a
And
good choice.
I can see that. But yeah, she's just great in this. What a year she had, this and Splendor in the Grass in the same year.
Yeah.
She was nominated for Splendor in the Grass, right? I think she was not nominated for West Side Story at the Oscars. I think she got nominated for Splendor.
That sounds right to me.
Which happens sometimes. Sometimes an actor has two big movies in a year. Like I'm thinking back on like Leonardo DiCaprio, the year of The Departed. He was not nominated for The Departed. He was nominated for Blood Diamond. So sometimes like the favorite movie of the year, but the actor who's like a big star, he's nominated for her other dramatic role. So that's always like kind of interesting. So that happened to Natalie Wood here.
And that kind of thing also, it makes me not so mad that Deborah Kerr didn't get nominated for Tea and Sympathy, because she was nominated for The King and I. She would have lost to Ingrid Bergman either way.
Okay.
So Oscar
Ingrid
history
Bergman.
is, yeah. You can't. It's
Anastasia, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she won 3. She won 3 Oscars, I want to say. Ingrid Bergman.
What were
the first one? The first one was in the 40s. Crap. Is it Gaslight she won for?
Oh.
She won an Oscar in the 40s, and then she won in the 50s for Anastasia, and then the 70s she won Best Supporting Actress for Murder on the Orient Express.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Yeah. But I mean, Ingrid Bergman should have won like 5. She was so great. I would have been happy with that, statistic. Right now it's Katharine Hepburn, unless Frances McDormand passes her by.
I don't know if that happens. I don't know, because
there's been talk about Frances McDormand winning again for Macbeth. I'm like, no.
Oh, have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't seen it, but they're not going to give her another one. Come on, like maybe a nomination. Like okay, enough. Like let's settle down, people. let's give some love elsewhere to some other actors.
Not that her speeches aren't great and we all like to watch them, but it would be nice to have some variety.
Yeah, another actor I love in West Side Story is John Aston, who was later Gomez on Addams Family. Like his scene in the dance hall is so great. Like I love him in this.
Yeah, I made a note of that it made me so happy to see him. I love him so much, and not even from just Addams Family, but from his little stint on Batman.
Right.
His Freaky Friday with Jodie Foster. Him as the dad. He just makes me happy just to look at him.
He's one of those, like Madeline Kahn, like some of these character actors I love. When they pop up in something, I get very happy.
Exactly.
I love him. He's great. And I love the use of color in this movie, even in the quietest moments. It's a very colorful, bright film. I love the use of like reds and purples, and the costumes are so great. And just the way that Wise uses color throughout the movie, especially to create like mood and tone, and it's just really beautifully done in terms of that element of color too.
Yeah, it's like its own little world when you watch that movie, like you said, with like lots of reds and stuff, and it's great. It's so good. You're gonna hear me saying that a lot because it's so good.
Yeah. So basically, what we're trying to say is it's really good. It's a good movie.
That just exasperated. I give up and just want to scream. It's so good.
And then, Rita Moreno, so stunning in that America song. I mean, she's great at the end too. I don't know if there was a specific scene that won her the Oscar for supporting actress. I mean, we get that amazing song, and then at the end, like she has not one but 2 moments towards the end where she gets very fiery, and it's a very, passion speech by her. That, I mean, she is just what a star-making vehicle for her too.
Out of all the actors in the movie, I think she probably was my favorite just to watch. You kind of like forget that you're watching somebody acting. She's so convincing. I'm glad that she got, like respected for this role, because she did a great job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she's great in this. So anything that you don't like in the movie, anything that doesn't work for you, or is it just a perfect movie?
Well, I made a note because I forgot her name. Is it Anybody's? Is that the character's name? The girl,
the tomboy one who's trying to get in with the group.
Yeah, there are times where the acting isn't great, and it's just obnoxious, and I'm like, I could see this like happening like in a play or something, and it kind of takes me. And I'm sure that Susan Oakes is a wonderful person. This is nothing against her, but that I don't care for it. If they cut
Okay.
that, I wouldn't be mad at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, how long is the movie? About 2 hours and 30,
2.5, yeah.
2 hours 30. I mean, and this is like a very nitpicky thing. There were a couple times watching, I'm like, it could be a little tighter at times. Like the movie could be a little tighter.
Mm-hmm.
But most of these older musicals that go 2 hours plus, usually it's kind of the nature of the beast. It's like you don't necessarily want to have it cut down too much. So I don't know. But that's just like maybe that's my 2021 like watching films and just like I talk about that all the time in the podcast. I'm like, well, it could have been 10 minutes shorter. You know?
Yeah.
I feel like this movie, there were a couple lulls. I'm like, well, it could be a little tighter, but I mean, I'm talking just a minute or two, like not very much. I do think she forgives him for the brother's death pretty quickly toward the end. Has that ever bothered you?
Yeah, that's kind of strange now that I think about it, because then they, Tony and Maria have that scene where they obviously just like went to bed together.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I never thought about it like that.
It just it's I don't know. I always think that's a little bit too easy, but I mean it works. It's fine. And then I mean that's basically it. I mean, I'm always like, for these older films, I'm like, is there anything that I would change or make better? I mean, I feel like there is enough here. And then of course the other thing to talk about a little bit is that, the controversy of brownface and like the casting a little bit, like, does that bother you at all? I mean, even Natalie Wood and that whole thing with like, her skin tone, and that gets a little dicey. That's one thing I think they're rectifying in the new film by Steven Spielberg, is like the casting of like Latina in the lead role and some of that stuff. I mean, it doesn't bother me that much, and it's a different time, 61, but it is something to still consider as we move forward and look at older films. I don't know.
Yeah, it's being such a fan of just like films through the decade. I've seen, what was acceptable, what wasn't then. So I'm definitely one of those one of those people that is able to like know like the context of like why that happened. And it doesn't bother. If anything, it makes me laugh watching Natalie Wood try to have an accent, and I'm like, why did this happen? It just makes me just think of anyone who made that decision and just judge them.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of the new version, which is opening in December, directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Tony Kushner, what are our thoughts on this being? I mean, I don't want to call it a remake, because I think they're doing the play, like they're doing the stage version. I don't think they're just pulling everything just out of the movie necessarily, but whatever you want to call it, a reimagining, new version. Like, what do you think about there being a new version of this story in 2021?
I'm okay with it, and what you just said about like not calling it a remake, I 100% agree with you. Okay. I remember when that Rebecca, they called it the remake, but I'm like, oh god, this is based on a story, people. It's an adaptation,
right? When it's based on a novel or a stage musical or like the book of the musical, I do think it's a little different, especially if we see the new version by Spielberg and it is scene by scene exactly the same as the 61 movie, then we might be like, okay, like, maybe it is just a remake. But I think they're going to make a few changes, right?
I'd like to think that he's smart enough to not do a shot-for-shot remake. Exactly. I can't imagine that happening.
Yeah. But Rita Moreno is in the new version, which I'm curious to see how that plays out. I mean, that's kind of cool. That's pretty rare that an actor appears in a movie, wins an Academy Award, and 60 years later is in the new version.
Amazing. And I'm like a big like soap opera fan, so I love when they have like people from like when it first started still on there doing stuff. So that it just makes me so excited that she's going to be involved with this.
Yeah. So I have high hopes. I mean, I'll be taking my mom to it probably opening weekend. I'm a huge Steven Spielberg fan. I've watched a lot of interviews with him over the years, and he's talked in interviews. He has said the one film I've never made yet that I want to do one day is a musical. He's always wanted to make a musical. So in his mid 70s, he's finally done it. So I just think that's kind of cool, even though it's a story we're all familiar with, but we are living in an age where, a lot of audiences like to know what they're going to see before they walk into the theater. Yeah. So, and that's kind of tricky, right? West Side Story, people know. They know if they're going to want to see it or not. So there you go.
100% agree. Yeah.
All right, so other things about the movie that we like. I mean, we said the songs. Uh, I love the classic kind of Romeo and Juliet story, but with a twist. The way that that is handled in the movie. If the movie had ended like Romeo and Juliet the play, I don't think it would be as powerful. Like I think if they both died at the end, I don't know if it would be as good. I like the way that we have that death and the emotion at the end, but there is a sense of hope, and it's not just completely downbeat for the last 10 minutes. I don't know if that would be as good.
I agree, and yeah, the ending, it was like the best possible ending that they could have had for it. I'm glad that they didn't take the Romeo and Juliet ending, but then I like the little things that pop up in the movie that very much remind you of that, like when Natalie Wood's on the fire escape, and it's like kind of be like the balcony for Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think they did a good mix of this is clearly inspired by this, but it's not just this.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's one of the most powerful stories in the history of cinema. Like two people fall in love, but for whatever reason they can't follow through. Like there's something that's pulling them apart. I just think, and that's obviously another popular film, Titanic. There are elements of that story in so many classic films, and there's something about it. It just pulls you in, and you want them to be together. And when they can't, it's just like, it's just that's what's the power of these stories. I just think it works so well.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. And I actually never made that connection with Titanic before to think about how it's kind of that same dynamic.
There is kind
And
of a similarity, right, between
they
the two
won a
films.
bunch of Oscars, so hey, if you're looking for Oscars, make one of these movies. They're really good.
Yeah, and it just even they can be cheesy sometimes. A lot of people criticize Titanic for it's kind of cheesy, but
Yeah.
that love story, it still grips me to this day. Like I love that idea of like they're not supposed to be together, but they're in love. Damn it! Don't pull them apart.
I was gonna say
But
we've all been there, but I don't think I
but
have.
in
I have a
both
very boring
movies,
life.
yeah. But in both movies, the guy dies and the girl lives. What do we think about that? For the best.
Yeah, to, and I don't. I hope this doesn't come off like sexist or anything, but I don't want to see like a pretty lady die. I mean, I don't want to
Exactly.
see anybody die, but if it had to be one to make a tragic story, I think so. And because Tony was so like sweet, it was
Right.
great casting. Even just his face,
Hmm.
I love him.
Hmm.
That was the right call to make.
Yeah. And another thing I love about the ending is the shocking nature of the reveal of the gun. Like the way that that's cut into that moment. It's like 60 years on. It's like, like it's really shocking the way that Wise cuts to the close up of the gun. It happens so fast. I can imagine in October of 61, audiences just going completely nuts at that moment because it happens very quickly. There's not like a slow, like you see the gun and the guy come out of the shadows and it's like cut to the gun, bang. Like it happens
It,
so fast.
and like you don't even initially know who got shot because they're
Right.
hugging as it goes
Yeah.
off, and that's brilliant. And it brought like tears to my eyes seeing Natalie Wood swinging around the gun at the end. That's just a shocking thing to see.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Hmm. She's really great in the ending when she's pointing the gun at everybody and you're watching it like thinking of it as Romeo and Juliet. You're like, oh my god, she's going to shoot herself and she's going to slump down onto his body and that's going to be the end of the movie. They could have gone that way,
yeah.
and I'm glad they didn't. That would have been too much.
Oh, and going back to Psycho, which was the year before,
Yeah.
I wrote his name down because I was going to forget. But Simon Oakland, who was
Right.
the guy at the end of Psycho, comes back at the end of this one too to kind of just like wrap it
That's
up.
right. I'm
I
so
thought that
glad.
was
Yeah,
interesting.
I forgot to write that down. I did notice that watching this because that's probably the most controversial scene in Psycho, right? Is that
Oh
ending of
yeah.
him explaining what has happened.
Amazing.
He is not a man. He is mother. Like that long speech he gives at the end, which is like interesting when you watch Psycho for the first time, but then when you're watching it for the 37th time, you're like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay because it gets us to that final moment with Anthony Perkins in the room, and that is so great. So I just like go with it. But and then in the remake by Gus Van Sant, he had to redo it, but with Robert Forster.
Wild. I watched or rewatched that a couple years ago, and I just why did it happen?
Every 10 year, I feel like 3 times I've given the Psycho remake a chance because it is an interesting idea. I'm
Yeah.
like, it's like never really been has it been done before? Like we're gonna remake it shot for shot, but in color with a new cast. My idea, Kenny, this is the movie I want to see, the remake I want to see. I want to see a classic film remade 30, 40, 50 years later, shot by shot, but the same exact cast.
Oh. Well, again, like I said, I love soap operas, and there are very many times where they'll like kind of like recreate a scene-ish to like remind you about like the good
Oh
old
yeah.
days, and they'll have older actors doing that, and it's always fascinating to see.
Like
I'm into it.
how great would it be to see American Pie in 2049 with the exact same cast, shot by shot.
And and they're all in high school, like it's Grease.
And it's still the same setting. It's a high school. It's every joke is the same. He's still doing his thing with the pie, but they're all 50 years older.
Well, just out of curiosity, I'd see it.
Like American Pie 2049. I mean, that would be good.
Oh my gosh,
Let's
I'm
make
gonna
it
be
happen.
thinking about that. All right, sure.
No,
I'm down.
it's one of those ridiculous ideas that will never happen for good reason, but it makes me laugh the thought of it.
That's so funny.
Psycho, we did not in 1998. We did not have Anthony Perkins anymore. I'm trying to think. We had Janet Leigh. I think we had most of the other cast, maybe, but yeah, we had to go with Vince Vaughn instead. And Vince Vaughn, who is a great dramatic actor in some things, I've never really liked his portrayal in the Psycho. It just never feels right. I don't know.
And I mean, I know, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Psycho, everybody, but I know that like Norman is ultimately the bad guy, but I've always just enjoyed him, even on Bates Motel, which is one of my favorite shows ever. I love
so
Norman, and with this remake, I didn't like it at all. He played him too like weird and creepy and just nervous. Yeah, like I didn't want to try to like help him. I just wanted to not look at him.
Yeah, I'm glad that Psycho had more life after the remake with Bates Motel with Vera Farmiga, who is another one of my all-time favorites. I've been watching Halston on Netflix, which is okay, but Vera Farmiga's in episode 3, and I just was like zoned it. I'm like, oh, here we go, playing again a character from the 70s.
I had
just love
no
her.
idea. Thank you for telling me that, because she is one of my favorite like modern actresses.
Oh yeah, and she plays this interesting character in episode 3 of Halston. I was like, can the show be about her? Like I want to follow her for the show.
She needs another show. Having her to look forward to every week was like one of the best times of my life.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Spoiler alert, even when she was dead in season 5, I still loved her performance.
And it was so strange, like knowing that was going to happen, but getting so invested that when it did happen, and they did it like the day after Mother's Day, I will never forget that. Oh gosh, it affected me. And I was nervous because I didn't want to be without Vera, and I was not without Vera. They did a great job with her.
I have still not been able to erase the shot of him holding up her body and her eyes are just glassy and she's just like slumped over dead. I have never been able to get that shot out of my mind. That was so creepy.
The super glue on the eyelids and the blue eye. Yeah, that was terrifying.
Oh,
and
God.
I'm curious to know if like that's like how folks would look in that state. If that is, that's even weirder. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to go Googling for it. I don't want to see anything else like that ever again.
That was and for it being her, an actress I just love, and just seeing her dead like that, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, because they did such a good job of like making her like, you know, sweet and you rooted for her and everything, and just to see like, you know, this woman that you cared about, just her corpse just flying about and everything, and these are her eyes and just being in the dirt, it was just so effective. I'll call it effective.
Yeah. Vera Farmiga should be in the new West Side Story. We should just put her in everything. Can we just do that? Hollywood, just Vera Farmiga, find something.
CGI her into Seinfeld. Maybe I'll finally watch it.
Seinfeld. CGI her into the original West Side Story. All for it. Mm-hmm. So as we wrap up our conversation on West Side Story, a few other things, like I wrote down some trivia. So the Broadway production started in 1957, conceived, directed, and choreographed by Jerome Robbins, and produced by Robert E. Griffith and Harold Prince. It marked Stephen Sondheim's Broadway debut. It ran for 732 performances before going on tour. It was nominated for 6 Tony Awards, including Best Musical in 1958. But the award for Best Musical went to The Music Man. Ugh. So it took the film version to really sweep their award ceremony of the Academy Awards. Robbins did win a Tony Award for his choreography. and Oliver Smith won for his scenic design. But the top award went to Music Man. Are you a fan of the Music Man? Guessing not.
Not really. It's one of those ones that like it was always on in like music class when I was a kid, but I never got invested in it. It's just I don't care for it.
I tried to watch it once and I wasn't into it. I just couldn't get in. I was like,
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't really care about like any of the characters either. I was just like, you're all just terrible in this town.
yeah. So something I think I might have known this, but I wasn't sure before. So Robert Wise technically co-directed this movie, West Side Story, with Jerome Robbins. Because Robbins had no prior experience directing movies, that's when they brought Robert Wise on to co-direct and produce, because of his experience in gritty subject matter in previous films he had made, and his ability to complete motion pictures under budget and ahead of schedule was a big reason, a couple reasons why they brought Robert Wise onto this.
Did they both get the Oscar for best directing?
And I was just thinking that as I was saying those words, I was like, did Jerome Robbins also get a trophy? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
It's pretty rare, right? That two directors, I mean, you have like, a Joel and Ethan Coen kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm assuming if they co-directed it, does it say in the movie directed by both of them? I thought it just said directed by Robert Wise, but maybe I blanked that out.
Yeah, in my head, like I feel like I knew it was both of them, so I didn't even think to look for that in the credits.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look back at that. So let's see. Did you know that Natalie Wood was not the original person they wanted for Maria?
Yeah, and it could only get more laughable if they went with the one they wanted at first. It's Audrey Hepburn, correct?
Oh, Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn. Did they want Audrey Hepburn for this? Maybe they did. I read that they wanted the original Maria on stage, Carol Lawrence, who played Maria in the stage version they wanted. She did a screen test. The producers agreed that she looked too old to play the part. And this is a tale as old as time, right? There's an actor, their actors are in the stage version. Sometimes they translate, they move on to the film version. Some of them don't. Very famous example is Jessica Tandy played Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire. Everybody else from the stage show did the movie except for her. They got Vivian Leigh from Gone with the Wind to play Blanche in the film version. It was great.
Yeah,
but that happens all the time. Julie Andrews, My Fair Lady, they decided to go with Audrey Hepburn for My Fair Lady, which allowed Julie Andrews to do Mary Poppins, and then Mary Poppins won her the Oscar for Best Actress over Audrey Hepburn, who was not even nominated, I want to say. So that was like a weird series of events too.
That clip's been floating around Twitter recently of when Julie Andrews accepts the Oscar and thanks Jack Warner.
Thank you, Jack Warner. Move. I don't know if that was the Oscar or the Golden Globe. It's one of the two. But like it's hilarious. Like the fact that she would even go there in an acceptance speech, that's just fantastic.
And I like Mary Poppins, and I love you, Julie Andrews, if you're listening. But it surprised me.
She's listening.
Yeah, she's listening. She actually has my phone tapped.
Just turned 86 years old recently. 86. Yeah, still going strong.
All right, then maybe I won't say the thing about Mary Poppins I was going to say then. I don't want to ruin her birthday. But no, I it's not my favorite Julie Andrews, but I'm glad she won just so she could have that moment.
Right. What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite Julie Andrews role?
Probably Sound of Music. Yeah, it's got to be Sound of Music. It's so good.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Also Robert Wise. He's just around a lot here. Yeah,
you mentioned Jessica Tandy, the Birds, also all these names
Birds
keep floating around.
Some of these actors, they get that horrible piece of news, you're not going to be in the film version, but then they go on to do lots of great stuff, right? Jessica Tandy would go on to win the Oscar for Driving Miss Daisy and be in so many great films, including The Birds. So it works out.
Yeah, I'm sure she's not mad.
Did you know Elvis Presley was approached to play Tony?
I didn't know that.
But his manager turned down the part.
Oh.
That would have been a different movie.
Yeah.
If that was Elvis, I don't know. Would that have made the movie work? I don't know. That would have been weird.
No, because he's too, he has that, flair about him. With the Tony that they picked, Richard Beymer, he just, again, has that sweetness to him. Mm-hmm. With Elvis... No, I think because he's just so famous and everyone would have known him, I don't think it would have worked.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it would have ruined the film, but that would have been in hindsight of he's such a cultural icon. I don't know. I feel like his presence in the movie would hurt it a little bit. I think that was a good call.
Like if a character was just like in the background, just going, "Is that Elvis?" Like I wouldn't be shocked. Yeah, so I agree.
Yeah. And then Natalie Wood, she was filming Splendor in the Grass. She made that before this. She was filming that with Warren Beatty. They were involved romantically off screen, which I had read before. The producers were not considering her for the role of Maria at the time, but they were considering Beatty to be Tony at the time. Did you know that?
I didn't
So
know that.
Robert Wise requested a reel of Warren Beatty's work in Splendor of the Grass, whatever they had. He saw a clip from the movie, Robert Wise did, and then he persuaded the producers to go with Natalie Wood for Maria. So he was watching footage from Splendor in the Grass to look at Warren Beatty, but Wise loved Natalie Wood in it so much, he said, let's use her for Maria. That's how she came to be in the movie.
That's funny how that works out.
And decided that Beatty was not right for Tony.
Yeah,
that would have been weird if they had cast Beatty too, and they had two different films the same year.
Oh yeah, I think people would have gotten annoyed real quick.
Like, okay, we got it.
Like all those Jennifer Lawrence and is it Chris Pratt movies that they
Jennifer
made
Lawrence and Bradley Cooper were in like three, like back to back. They did a bunch. I mean, it happens. They were in Silver Linings Playbook, American Hustle, and that other one, that costume drama that I never saw. They made another one together.
Yeah, it wasn't like kind of like westernish looking, maybe.
Yeah,
they all blend together.
But yeah, that happens sometimes, and I don't think Warren Beatty would have ruined this movie. But I like who they went with for Tony. Let's see, anything else? It was the highest grossing film of the year, won 10 Oscars, as I talked about. It's regarded by most as one of the greatest musical films of all time, has been deemed culturally significant by the United States Library of Congress, was selected for the National Film Registry in 1997, and then the new film adaptation is coming this December. Are you going to be there opening weekend, or are you going to kind of like wait it out?
Oh, I never know what's going on in my life anymore. It'll definitely happen. Don't anybody post any spoilers. I'll get mad if I find out what happens.
You think? I wonder. It'll be the same ending, right? Does the stage version end the same way? Like, I can't imagine they're gonna like kill off her, not him, or do something weird and wonky like that.
I can't imagine. Oh, before we wrap up, though, I do have one little thing that I saw the other day, and I saved it for the podcast.
Oh, cool.
It was a quote from Russ Tamblyn talking about Jerome, told us that on set one day that the idea of West Side Story really came from Montgomery Clift, who was Jerry's boyfriend at the time. So, allegedly, all this is because of Monty Clift.
Monty Clift came to the rescue of this
love him
idea
so much. Yeah.
Monty Clift is one of your favorites?
Yeah, him and Farley Granger are my top favorite actors of all time. Yeah.
Farley Granger, we just did an episode earlier this year on Strangers on a Train. He's great.
Yeah. And you can see he's here. I really need to get a mat for this frame. I hate that it's just sitting there. But yeah, that's They Live by Night. He's on my wall.
Yeah, in terms of like the history of Hitchcock, I mean, Farley Granger to be in Rope and Strangers on a Train, two films that have kind of gay undertones, like so interesting, like really cool. Like, I love that he was able to do both of those films, and his presence in those movies just really make them so special. He's great in them. So yeah, anything else you wanted to say about West Side Story? Anything else that any other scenes or moments or songs? Anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, favorite songs. I wrote Tonight and America and G Officer Krupke. I like those. I don't care for the cool scene as much as I think it kind of goes on a little too long.
How about I Feel Pretty, Witty, and Gay?
Of course I like that one. I mean, yeah, Marnie Nixon singing that and Natalie Wood's just dancing around.
Twirling around.
Saying gay. I'm like, what's not to love?
So my last question about the movie is, what influence do you think that West Side Story had on musicals, on film as a whole, in the years after this, in the last 60 years? Like, what influence do you think this movie had on cinema, West Side Story?
I don't know if it would have started this, but I think just like the grand feeling of the movie, and like you said in the intro, when it just like shows like all the locations, it really sets the scene for where this is all playing out. it kind of had it made it feel like it had a really big scope to it,
Mhm.
and I think that's something that if you're going to make a big movie musical after that, you got to do stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So yeah, this is just a great film. I think a lot of people are probably going to watch it again before the new version comes out in December. It's a great way to celebrate it for its 60th anniversary. Came out 60 years ago in 1961. So thank you, Kenny, so much for being on the podcast today. Do you have anything you'd like to promote or tell our listeners where they can find you online?
If you like hearing me talk about tea and sympathy like every 3 days, you can follow me at It's Kenny again on Twitter. Yeah, I just like to talk about movies. Some people have, I've tweeted about a movie and then be like, oh, thank you for introducing me to that. So if you're into that kind of thing, come find me.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again for being here, Kenny. Thanks to all of you for listening. We will catch you next time on Film at 50.